Welcome to the Connected Campus podcast, where we explore the ways that diverse professionals are working every day to optimize their efforts to recruit, retain, and graduate their students.
Welcome to another amazing episode of the Connected Campus podcast. This one holds a unique distinction where our guest is, I guess, kind of surprisingly, I don't know why it hasn't happened sooner, but here we are. This is the first higher ed CISO or CISO or CISO, however you want to say it. So they're going to be bringing, I think, a very unique perspective and helping to kind of bring in the security side of things of how higher education IT leaders are kind of grappling with a variety of topics. So just really excited for this conversation. But we'll start out as we always do. Eric, if you want to introduce yourself and your professional background and how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. Thank you. My name is Eric Zematis, and I'm I've been in higher ed for almost the last 30 years. So I started in my early 20s and have been kind of consistently inside of higher ed. Been at about 5 or 6 institutions in various roles in higher ed. Started off kind of on the academic computing side, and then moved to more of administrative or running the ERPs, or student information systems and related systems. And then I got kind of into security about 12 years ago or so. Had one stint as running infrastructure at another university for a couple of years, and then got back into the security game. I've been at Lehigh University for about the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I know of Lehigh. I live kind of in the general area, so I kind of, any of those kind of times where it's just like, I've seen that name around a lot, or know people that work there and everything. So very happy to have you on, and again, bringing your perspective as a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, for anybody who may not be aware. But so again, you'll be bringing that in, but I did kind of want to honor part of your background as well, of that you have, consistently taught, throughout a lot of your background in higher education. So one question I want to make sure we didn't get kind of too far away once we start getting into kind of all the information security stuff, the experience of teaching, has that sort of impacted or informed your day-to-day work as a CISO, or sort of what's kind of the relationship there of because I feel like it could be teaching impacts my day-to-day impacts my teaching and that sort of thing. So any anecdotes or perspectives on that of kind of juggling those two different roles?
Sure. I mean, I have been teaching at various institutions for about the last 25 years. So almost my entire run inside of higher ed. I've also been teaching on the side, and I kind of look at it as, you can't have your whole day can't be filled with the boring stuff of higher ed IT. You need to have some fun too. And so getting in front of the classroom, whether that is physically or in front of engaging students through online classes, is really just brings a lot of fun, kind of makes the whole thing dynamic. And it also gives you a good perspective, right? So when you are teaching, you kind of you have firsthand experience of what kind of problems occur when technology doesn't work in a classroom. So when you're dealing with faculty or you're dealing with students, you can say, hey, I know exactly how much that hurts when a piece of technology doesn't work and you're in front of 50 people. So it does help me, I think, relate to whatever various roles I've been in. I've been able to kind of relate to the core mission of the university, which is education.
Yeah, well, and obviously, you can give such a valuable perspective now. And, there's people from industry that teach and they bring that in, but just that idea, that in your context, you're working in higher ed, IT, in information security and everything, and just that, there is just kind of that symbiosis, where you're able to give the tangible, this is what it's like, this is how this sort of concept or theory actually plays out, those sort of things. So, and good to hear that you have fun with it. That's just like you said, a good change of pace and keeps it dynamic and all that kind of good stuff. So, all that to be said, we really talk with all of our guests, whoever they are, about digital transformation. So we'll kind of start with sort of the big kind of umbrella, that is sort of like, the thing of the moment is digital transformation. It's sort of hitting institutions all across the country in a variety of different ways. So at Lehigh, how have you been seeing digital transformation playing out over your time there?
Well, I mean, since I've been at Lehigh, we've had a lot of maturing of technologies, I think. So there hasn't been outside of maybe, generative AI and kind of the explosion in the last year, there hasn't been a technology that we've put on campus that's brand new. So, it's not like the 80s and 90s when you were installing the first learning management system or maybe the institution's first student information system. We've been evolving those things. So, but I think really there's been more pressure brought on by the pandemic to make things, to do more things based on workflows, to make processes around students registration, those type of activities, those administrative activities, more accessible online, less intervention of individuals. So we've had kind of an evolution of things like that. On the teaching side, I think that there is, flexibility is kind of the thing that's come out of the pandemic, right? So everyone expects that if they're going to miss class, well, they'll just watch the video. So are you recording this? So you see a lot of classrooms who have the ability to just record video on the fly. More seminar rooms that might not have that built-in ability. You see faculty member throwing their MacBook on top of their podium and kind of streaming it while they're talking because they know that there's that expectation that students are kind of driving now. Some are just saying, hey, you know what? You show up, you get it. You don't get the notes, which is kind of where we were before the pandemic. But I think that shifted a lot because of all the flexibility that was needed during the pandemic.
Yeah, I guess that is like a good point of that, and that's why I think it's sort of the sky is falling kind of moment right now for higher ed, or sort of the focus of that sort of anxiety, that generative AI is the first sort of completely kind of new or foreign thing that each institution has to sort of grapple with and interface with in a while. It's been, as much as sort of that verbiage that I guess we've all just sort of for whatever reason kind of decided on of digital transformation, there is a very powerful aspect to that of kind of improving all aspects of sort of the digital ecosystem and infrastructure at an institution. But it is maybe being well, we need a more modern LMS or a more modern SIS, or it's improving upon kind of, the foundation that was put in place maybe decades ago. And to me, it is my mind, as it often does, thinks of metaphors. It's that idea of the frog in the boiling water, not realizing that it's boiling water. So it's an idea of you've had these tools for a very long time that might be working fine, but you're not kind of starting to realize, certain institutions may not be realizing as quickly as others, where it's just oh, this thing just really is not keeping up with the preferences of students or the demands of what your institution is requiring, or it doesn't really work well with the other things that you have and all that. So do you have that sort of perspective? I guess it is that sort of marginal improvement, but we're kind of reaching that boiling point where institutions are really needing to kind of more closely examine the tools that they have to see where they can make those maybe kind of marginal improvements on sort of legacy systems.
Lehigh's engaging in a strategic plan process, and it was launched at the beginning of the year. And one of the components of that is really about user experience. And I think the difference in what's going through higher ed right now is that we've done innovations around implementing student information systems, implementing course management systems, and other types of systems all throughout campus. And I contend that higher ed has more of those type of systems and more SaaS solutions than large corporations have, just because everyone who wants this particular tool just goes out and buys that particular tool. But in all those cases, really, the driving force has been what will work for administration or what will work for faculty, and not a focus on what will work for students. So I think one of the things that Lehigh hopes to get as we pursue that goal of improving the user experience is really having a student-focused or student-centered type of redesign or relook at all those tools.
Yeah, that's definitely a very good point. And I think, just conversations with a vast variety of different people in different roles and, all that, like that feels like, if you were to compare like, oh, we're going out, and it is an idea of like recognizing too, that it's like, we're buying our first LMS or something and all that, like there's that one paradigm is vastly different than, how it is now in terms of how institutions are navigating what digital tools they're using and how and all that. But like what you're saying of like the student experience, the user experience being such a much more primary driver of, how you're evaluating tools and everything like that is such a fundamental shift from, decades ago of, when a variety of other tools were put in place and everything. So, and I think that's a good segue to kind of my next question, and this might be where we spend a little bit more time, is, in your position, overseeing information security at the institution, we've talked about this with some other folks that work like, outside and with institutions, but that idea of like balancing convenience with security, like that's the idea of like, you could put all these sort of onerous steps and it's like, we have the most secure system because it's like, multiple interlocking vault door, whatever, like in sort of the digital version of that. But like, you want it to be, balancing convenience, but also be secure. So like, what's your perspective on that of like how you try to kind of thread that, needle of making sure that it's not an unsecure, super convenient system or a completely inconvenient, highly secure system? Like you want to try to, fall right in the middle there. So what's your perspective on that?
Well, I mean, first of all, you have a danger of if you make it too inconvenient, then people will navigate around your security controls. So you don't want to make it the barrier so high that that people feel that they're doing good work by circumventing the controls. So so that's one of the dangers. You can actually increase your security posture, but reduce your overall security if you're not careful. If you don't consider user experience as part of that. So one of the things we try to do, and running a information security program in a higher ed institution, it's not a bank, so you're not protecting money per se. So what you need to do is you really need to have kind of a balanced, and I always call it a value-based approach. So we don't spend a lot of time trying to protect against things that aren't actually risks. So if we have a lot, like everyone else, a lot of risk around use of email and phishing campaigns and those type of things. So we focus on those areas. And we don't focus on, what if a nation state actor decides they want to have an advanced persistent threat and compromise, these systems. If that happens, I mean, we try to have general good hygiene that will kind of provide some protection. But if one of these nation state actors wants to invest a lot of resources to compromise our systems, then they'll probably be successful. And there's probably not a lot I can do within resources, budget, and personnel resources to go against a nation state. It's just not it's not an equal effort type of thing. They can always outwork. But what we want to do is actually provide the security around just the things that we're seeing risks. So that value type of proposition says, hey, you know what? When we start to see more, say, accounts being compromised because our two-factor system we need to improve it or something like that. What we do is we say, well, we're seeing more compromises. Therefore, we're going to respond by increasing our security posture to meet what we're seeing. That helps. It makes it clear to leadership across the university that, hey, we're seeing an uptick, we're responding. Okay, well, it seems really proportional. We're not going way over the edge to say, hey, we're going to lock everything down everywhere. We just kind of incrementally are always considering that and based on the threats we're seeing, we're making adjustments, improving our security. So that is how we kind of respond to threats. The other thing we do around security, and Lehigh's a research university, so the demands from funders such as the federal government are increasing. And so a lot of our effort is really spent on creating secure environments so that researchers can continue to do the research they need to for the on campus. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I'm just sort of like identifying, somewhere where it's like, okay, there's very clear, federal guidelines on this research that's very sensitive and all that. We're going to put the emphasis there where it's warranted. And then other areas, it's just like, well, yeah, they get in there. There's not going to be that much damage they can do. They're going to sort of, eventually hit a wall. And even the kind of like refreshing point of view that I kind of think about it, it's like kind of I feel like sometimes kind of a weird reassurance, but that's sort of like kind of chaos theory of like, you know what, like things are going to happen. If somebody really wants to, do something, like they'll find a way. Like I cannot fully prevent, or it's not worth the effort to like, basically like put myself into like a metal dome, and it's like nobody can break into my house because I live in a metal dome and whatever. Like it's like it's a little bit overdone there. But that idea is like, well, we're never going to be able to match. If somebody really wanted to like target us, I guess like we're not going to be able to match that, sort of onslaught or whatever. And because I think it's the idea of like institutions are going to have limited resources. And it is idea like you really want to, you're saying kind of meet, threats or whatever else, like with the appropriate sort of response and not sort of like be wasteful, I guess is sort of, what I'm thinking of is sort of the terminology or sort of a value that you want to try to like keep implementing. Cause it could be that idea of like, well, it's maybe, this cool new bright, shiny security thing or whatever. But it's like, I don't think that that's necessary, and certainly maybe not necessary for like the entire institute. Like we don't need to, put in place the same guidelines that we're doing for this research project on the entire institution, because it's just, you're going to kind of topple over on that convenience side and have people just, circumventing. And, you feel reassured as like the IT leader. It's like, well, look at us. We've got this huge posturing. We're secure, right? And it's like, well, everybody's just like going around the back end there. So do you find that like, I don't know, I guess how maybe like student input comes into play? I guess just that idea of like how you sort of are, because I guess you were giving a very clear reasoning and a very clear perspective on how you sort of navigate this. And so like, I guess how you sort of interface with your various stakeholders to kind of explain like, well, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. Because I'd imagine even like the simple two-factor authentication or different things, people are like, why do I have to do this? Oh, come on, this is so, so much work. I'm using air quotes here, so like, I guess what's that sort of like engagement with your community about like what you're doing and why? Like, do you have anything that you kind of can think of there?
Well, I mean, that whenever you increase your security posture. So for instance, we're currently we've had two-factor authentication for a while. And we're starting to see more successful attacks against it. So those attacks are using what are called insecure second factor methods. So texting, code generation, and we use a product called Duo. So code generation in Duo, and phone calls. So those are kind of considered insecure methods. There's ways to kind of pretty easily circumvent them. And we weren't concerned initially because for the first couple of years, we weren't seeing anyone circumventing these things. So we kind of allowed it because it was more convenient for the users. And when we implemented two-factor and someone said, I don't want to use my personal cell phone, we said, well, you can use your office phone and just have it give you a call. So it helped us, that kind of posture, we said, we're going to be flexible, helped us kind of transition people from not using two-factor to using two-factor. Now we have to kind of adjust things because we're seeing more attacks. So we announced that change in November, and we're continuing to communicate it. And people do. They say, "Well, why do I need to do this?" And I can say, "Well, it's based on actual data of accounts being compromised, attacks against things like direct deposit, using our accounts to spam other institutions and other things." So there's a legitimate reason, and people typically, they don't still have that perspective. They don't know what's going on. It doesn't impact them. So having that sort of approach where you're just gradually, you use an analogy of boiling the frog, but you kind of adjusting things and making reasonable responses. It both helps with senior leadership to know, hey, you know what, we're doing the things we need to do in a pace that works for our community. And you're always going to get people who just want to complain. You give them the chance to kind of say their piece. You stick to the reason why you're doing something. And, typically a lot of times people who complain just want to have their complaint heard. They don't need to, they're not necessarily looking for a change, but they just want to have a voice for kind of, and that's part of what makes higher ed special, is that we're a place where we want everyone's voice, students, faculty, and staff, to kind of, in that community, to have a voice. So, sometimes you just need to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just like, the terms come up a lot in this conversation and others, that idea of just like the flexibility, like that's, really important. And I think helps determine what digital tools any institutional leader is choosing. And that idea that like, if you're using something, that's doing like the texting code, or you need an app for, or whatever, it's like, oh, I don't want to, if somebody is complaining where it's like, oh, I don't want to use my personal phone to do this. And like the flexibility built into the tool that you chose, it's like, it can call your office phone, like in, your space, and kind of keep that separation that you're looking for. And just like, as time goes on, you can maybe better anticipate. And as you continue to make yourself available for that feedback and everything, you can kind of just anticipate like, well, we're going to need to maybe have a way that can not be entirely reliant on, having to download an app or having to get a text message or doing whatever. It's like, those are super convenient and probably going to be the preferred or default ways. But if somebody wants a flexible, different option, we're going to respect that and, hopefully be able to provide that. And yeah, if nothing else, make ourselves available, be empathetic, and give the context that is desired, where it's like, we gave kind of the, kind of boilerplate messaging on, we're making this change and this is why. And then somebody, might be frustrated or just not understand. It's like, well, we can go into more and tell you that it's like, well, we've been experiencing, increased threats and, attacks and all these sort of things. So this is not coming out of nowhere, and it's not just sort of an arbitrary change for its own sake and all that. So,
yeah. And I think it's important to remember that when we talk about, students, faculty, and staff using something like, Duo to kind of protect their account, they're providing a password, they're providing that second factor, and that's protecting that account. But there is a framework called NIST CSF, cybersecurity framework, and that is user facing. But I can also improve the security by improving my ability to detect when accounts get compromised, right? So let's say I assume that my protection isn't going to be 100%. Well, if it's not 100%, as quickly as I can detect that there's been an issue, okay, and respond to that issue and recover that account, if I can do that lightning fast, then it's almost as effective as just protecting in the first place. And the analogy of a bank, so, I have a bank, I put my valuables inside the vault in that bank, right? That's called identify in this framework. I lock the vault, I put a guard outside to protect it, okay? But there may be someone who figures out a way through that vault. And if I can detect that money is being stolen, and then have the police respond within 30 seconds and arrest the people as they're leaving the bank and recover all the money, then all those things working together are really what gives me security, because I'm not just providing, I'm not just putting up a big wall, and if you get over the wall, everything is yours. No, I have a bunch of different, I've invested in every one of those buckets to make sure that we have complete security. And a lot of those don't even involve the users and don't inconvenience the users.
And this makes me think of something, and I realize I've never asked somebody in a position like yours a question like this. And so this is kind of just, going off the cuff here. But yeah, that idea, like, it just made me think of that idea of like, okay, if you get over the wall, then it's kind of just like, all right, well, game over, I guess. Like you won, you got it, whatever. Because I know that like, and this may be like an old school thing from like me loving movies and TV, but it's like this concept of like, if you get in past a certain point, past layers of security, they just assume you're supposed to be there, like, and it's the idea of like, well, we need to build systems that can try to like, well, what was the point of origin or something? I don't like, but how does that play out, I guess, in like your background, your work, that idea of like, well, there's a system in place, but if somebody can get past a certain point, then they're just assumed that they belong there or something. Like, I just like remember thinking of that a lot, where it's just like, yeah, that's basically how they think of security in movies, is like, if you like get past the key card thing, you could just like stroll around, because like, like secret agent movies or whatever. So how do you see that kind of like playing out, I guess, and how you kind of build the sort of infrastructure to try to anticipate and intervene in those sort of situations?
Sure. So the that key card type of thing, typically you're key carding access, but in places that really care about security, you're wearing that badge all day, right? So it's that, so you might be called out by someone because you're not badged. Like, who's this person that's just walking around? And inside of the security world, it is certainly possible. Like, if I got access to your credentials to your email account, I could just sit there and probably never be detected, right? Because I'm not doing anything. But our attackers don't typically have that MO. The most common attacks we get are financially motivated. So at some point, they're going to want to do something in order to monetize what they've got. That might be using your account to send spam, in which case we'll get alerts. Maybe one of my colleagues, CISOs, will contact me and be like, Eric, you're sending us a lot of spam from this account. Please shut it off. So typically, because they want to be able to send spam or other things, or they want to change a user's direct deposit, or they want to try to do some other kind of financial fraud, we know that the majority of our attackers are looking for opportunities to monetize what they've done. So they're not just going to sit there forever. So there are behaviors you're going to see. There are things that are going to occur that are typically going to alert you that something's going on. There are situations where someone has high value targets. So think about, if I'm working in the Department of Defense, right? Someone's going to want to compromise their accounts or their systems and really just sit there and wait. They might be very patient. Typically, we're not seeing those sort of attacks, but that's typically how you discover it, because I know their motivation. I know that they want to monetize things, and we have these common ways that attackers want to get monetized. Ransomware attack is one I didn't mention as well. I mean, at some point, they're going to need to launch the attack, and how quickly I can respond and how well I've done for backups and other types of things are going to help reduce the damage.
Yeah, I guess that's the idea of like, sure, maybe you could get in and be undetected, but it's like, eventually you're going to do the thing, whatever you were planning to do, that is going to be the red flag and all that. So it's like, I don't know. And I guess, yeah, it's just like one of those things of like movie magic or whatever else, where it's just like, oh, like they assume you're supposed to be there and no problems. You can just waltz in and do whatever you do and then just like walk out or something. And it's like, no, probably when you do the thing that you were doing to like take something away, or I don't know, they're going to like notice that, I guess. Cause yeah, that's a good point. It's going to be like, spamming or preventing access to something or whatever else. And that's going to be identified because it's sort of like out of the norm, or sort of the routine is kind of disrupted. So
yeah, and I mean the concept is defense in depth, right? So you have multiple type of, you're not just building a high wall. You have some kind of checks or some kind of other processes, or I mean, at core levels, I mean, that your institution has a security department, right? So when something weird happens, someone knows who to call. Like, I don't know what's going on. Something weird. I thought, you built a relationship on campus and people know, hey, I don't know what's going on. Well, why don't you ask the security folks? And they're supposed to know stuff like this. And so building those relationships, even having a person to call. And a small institution that doesn't have someone, they're probably going to reach out to their IT shop. But, it does make you more vulnerable when people are like, oh, no one's ever kind of prepped us for this. No one's prepared us for these things. We're not ready.
Yeah. And that's, one of my final questions here is sort of that idea of like how you work in partnership with your colleagues. Because I think it's an idea of like, hopefully somebody's title has security in it. So there's at least, even if it's not like a, CISO person who's very prominent or, very clear, like you are the chief of information security or whatever, somebody is giving sort of the full-time focus that this warrants and deserves and everything. But I guess just any perspectives or reflections on like the work you do happening in partnership with your colleagues, because I imagine it can happen at any point of like, evaluating digital tools or anything like that, where it's like, hey, we're thinking about this. Is it something that feels like it would be a good, secure option or whatever else? So just any thoughts on like, how you do work and how you might prefer to work wherever you kind of want to take this question.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's two directions I think we can take it. I tell people if you're familiar with the term BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal is to have 10,000 people on my security team, which would represent, all the faculty, staff, and students at Lehigh, really. Because if everybody's doing their part, then security gets a lot easier. So when I'm dealing with people, if someone wants to buy a new software system, one of the processes they go through is they go through the purchasing process. And one of the processes we do there is actually a security review. And the purpose there isn't to say, hey, you can buy this piece of software, or you can buy this software service, or you can buy this. It's really about helping to identify the risks and make the person who's acquiring that software. So they're at a level, there are various levels in the organization, but they're at a level where they've been empowered to go make purchasing decisions on top of behalf of the university. And so what I try to do is, as my team kind of guides them through that process, is to understand what type of data you're collecting. What if the system goes down? What are the impacts? Is there a risk here? And if we identify risk, we identify it in such a way to educate that person who's making the decision. And we've had situations where we've said, okay, well, there's some risk here, so let's ask some questions about their security, how they manage this data, and we've had situations where the vendor's like, well, we don't really have a security program here. And I'll turn to the person buying it. If in one of the cases I was the one doing it, and I said, is that how you want one of your partners to respond? That we're not really concerned about it and we're not going to do it. And it is indicating that when you have a problem using their software in a year, that's how they're going to treat you. And, I've had situations where they've said, yeah, I don't really want it. I'll just go with option number 2, because that doesn't seem like they're a very strong partner. Because when they're buying the system, security is part of it. It's not an unnecessary add-on, particularly if it's working with student data. They recognize they don't want to have to deal with, data loss and that type of thing. So they're going to make sure that they include that in their overall. So that's kind of how we operationalize things, is to have everything go through a security review. I have a unit that looks at risk assessments, purchasing, working with vendors, third parties, other types of things. So.
Yeah. And I guess my takeaway there is like that I'm sure is, every institution is doing those sort of reviews in whatever way they've kind of set it up. But even just the idea of like knowing obviously how important that is for a higher ed institution and wanting to hopefully not have that like hold up sort of like, okay, we're grappling with digital transformation, we're evaluating tools, we want to go a different direction, bring on something like, if it's kind of like bottleneck, because it's like obviously again a very crucial and important step, but if it's just like, well, there's the one person who does it, it's like, well, hopefully you'd have maybe a team of people empowered to sort of support there, to do like a efficient but thorough analysis and to just make either sort of a clear endorsement of like, yeah, this is great and this is why, and we're good to go, or there's maybe kind of some yellow flags like, well, if they do this, then we'd be, in a good spot, or, we need them to do this and they're unwilling to do it. So like, we can't.
I think it's all about, and it's just like how we help students, right? It's all about delivering value. So if you're going to make people jump through a hoop, well, you need to make sure that hoop has value. So, a vendor, someone who's buying something Lehigh of an outside company might not think about, well, asking that company what the SLA agreements are. What's your guarantee that this thing is going to be up? Is it, could it be down for a month? Could it be down for a week? Could it be down for a day? What kind of guarantees do you have? And so with our perspective, if we give that power to that user, they're like, oh, that's actually a good question, because, we have admissions things going on. And if that system was down for a week, I don't know how we would do that. So I focus on trying to deliver value through that process, so that if I can deliver this much value, then I have to make sure that process only takes that much, right? So I got to have more value than the time it takes. So always kind of focusing on that. If there's not a lot of risks, you just kind of like say, okay, just keep on going.
Right. Well, yeah, again, like if it's like something that like will not handle student data in any, measure, then it's like, okay, yeah, we don't really need to like, do an exhaustive sort of thing. But I guess it's like on both sides of the coin. I feel like just something that's going to resonate with me from this conversation is that idea of like student experience, the user experience, that balancing of security and convenience, like kind of applies too as you're like working with your colleagues and trying to do efficient, thorough analyses of, different tools and all of that. It's like you do want to make sure that it's a, convenient but also secure sort of process to, like make sure that like something that could be, again, this shiny new thing that will help with enrollment is going to be stable, reliable, secure, and all that, and get those kind of assurances from the vendor and everything. So all really good stuff. And we will end now with the question that we ask all of our guests. What does a connected campus look and or feel like to you?
Well, I think when I hear the term connected campus, and I mentioned before about having a culture of security, or having people all kind of working together on something. So there certainly is a diversity of opinion on campuses, on vibrant campuses. There certainly is a diversity of opinions, and hopefully a diversity of backgrounds and that type of thing. And one of the things that makes a university exciting to work at is that you are surrounded by people with many different ideas and backgrounds. But they also need to have, and when I think connected, just being the perspective of technology, they need to have the tools that kind of enable them to kind of participate in that community. So whether it's, communication tools, or it is, registration, the ability to get into the classes you need to get, the ability to have the materials they need in their classes posted in a learning management system, or other things where they can get access to them. So having all those pieces together, and hopefully working together to kind of to make them more and more provide less and less friction, so that people can get what they've come to for that institution. So with students, they're learning, they're being able to participate in research, they're serving the communities around them, which are kind of the three tenets of our mission at Lehigh: education, research, and community service. So hopefully we're providing tools that enable those things to happen, to allow staff to be efficient, so that we can invest more in those three areas than just overhead of administration. Yeah,
I like that. Like enablement of tools to get connected and be a part of the community and everything, and just reducing friction. And because that's always something that I think about. Is like it's such a tragedy when that sort of earnest desire, whenever it happens, of like, applying or enrolling in a program or registering for courses or trying to do your coursework, like you hit friction and it's just more frustrating, or sort of like, it takes more time than you think it should. And so that, people kind of bail out or quit, or, just trying to create as much sort of satisfaction and, you said, efficiency and all of that. Like those words hopefully are ringing in people's ears of like, what is emblematic of a connected campus, and that, folks like yourself trying to enable tools that achieve those goals and everything. So, really appreciate your perspectives and your time. We'll have ways to connect with you if folks want to keep the conversation going. But just really appreciate you jumping on and bringing on the CISO perspective to the podcast here. And it was really great to hear from you.
Yeah, as I said, I'm passionate about higher ed, so I just enjoy the conversation, and I wish you a good day as well.
Thanks for listening to the Connected Campus. Please leave a 5-star review for the show and share it so others can discover us. Make sure to also subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Connected Campus.